We had a reception for them. Just, any questions you have about what you witnessed today, what you experienced. And one of the boys in the group, he'd grown up here. This is not an immigrant. This is somebody probably second generation, third generation Muslim young man. And he raised his hand. He said, "Are Jesus and Santa Claus the same person?" Which at first sounds really funny. But
you can totally see how he came to that conclusion.
Yeah, but he didn't have, again, he's gone to public school. And he did not have a Christian friend that could answer that question for him.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is why I think what we're talking about here, building the relationship is so important. Getting into their lives is so important, because that's part of how you show the love of Christ to your Muslim friend or to another immigrant who is new to the United States.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Calvary Conversations. I'll be your host today, Dr. Joshua Paxton, Director of the Burnham Center for Global Engagement here at Calvary University. And my guest today is Reverend Mike Urton. He is the Director of Immigrant Mission for the All People Initiative of the Evangelical Free Church of America. We had a great laugh about the length of that title before we started. So welcome, Mike. I'm glad to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So today's conversation is about reaching unreached people groups in North America. Now, we're having this conversation because of a couple upcoming events that Calvary is hosting. And so we want to start the conversation, but we also want to make you aware of some things that are coming up. And so October 6th, Calvary will be hosting a Zoom webinar with our guest, Mike, about establishing a biblical basis for reaching unreached people groups in North America. How does Scripture give us evidence for that? And then Mike will also be joining us in January for our annual conference on global engagement to offer an extended seminar that's going to be Tuesday evening, January 24th. On how local churches can be intentional about reaching the nations around them. And so we wanted to start this conversation today, but also let you know that we're going to be continuing it through a few upcoming events. So Mike, thank you again for joining me today. And how did you get involved with unreached people groups in the United States?
Well, to tell that story, we're going to have to go back to the Stone Ages of the mid-1990s, when I was graduating from college. It feels weird to say that. We just graduated from college yesterday, right?
I was still in high school in the mid-1990s.
See, like I said, Stone Age.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready to graduate from college. I was at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and was involved with the ministry of Cru. And I, grew up as a Christian in that ministry. But like most other seniors, I had my life all figured out at that point and didn't know what I was going to do. Well, I went to a conference and somebody got up and shared about the country of Turkey and the need for people to come and work with college students there. And it was like the Holy Spirit said, "Go do that." And I said, "I think I'll go do that." And so got accepted, worked with college students in the capital city of Ankara for a year, 95, 96. Came back from that experience and actually went on staff with Cru for 4 years. And sensed the call of God to go back overseas. And at that time, I thought it was going to be to train church leaders overseas. And I thought I have to get some more training myself. And so I wound up at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School here in the Chicagoland area. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I got involved with a ministry called the South Asian Friendship Center. I don't know how familiar you are with Chicago area.
I'm not very familiar with Chicago at all.
Okay, so this is
the airport. That is what I know of Chicago is the airport.
I think most people know the airport, O'Hare. O'Hare Airport. Midway is a little less well known, but we have two. But O'Hare being the big one. Anyway, there's an area of Chicago called Little India, and in Little India, there's a ministry called the South Asian Friendship Center, and they reach out to folks from India and Pakistan, so Hindus, Muslims. And for me at the time, I was like, wow, this is great. This is a ministry outlet for me while I'm in seminary. You know, it's
Absolutely.
not the same country I'm going to be going to, but you know, a little more culturally near. Kind of keeps me in the cross-cultural thing, gives me some more experience. But that's really where the ship started to turn for me,
Okay.
and to see that there are people that God is bringing here to the United States um, that have come from places that with little to no gospel witness among them, and still thought I was going to go overseas after that. But through a series of events, God made it clear that this is where I was supposed to be, and assisting the local church and walking alongside the local church to help them reach out to unreached people groups in their locale. And just to extend that a little bit, where I live right now in DuPage County, Illinois, the percentage of Muslims in DuPage County, Illinois is 6%. That sounds small, but national average is 1% right now. So it's 6 times the
Okay.
national average. And the way I like to explain it to people is if you're in a grocery store, library, some other public place like that, there are more than 20 people there. One of them will be a Muslim. So it's highly unusual to be in public and
Definitely
not.
puts it more perspective on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I think this would be accurate that our listeners would understand what we mean by unreached people groups. But maybe real quick, take a couple of seconds and just define for us what you mean by an unreached people group,
Sure.
just to make sure everybody understands.
Yeah, so an unreached people group, people who are their country of origin, where they're coming from, is a place with little to no gospel witness among that group of people. Good for instance. So right now I'm in a book discussion with some Muslim men, and they've actually told us, we know our faith, but we don't know anything about what Christians believe.
Yeah, yeah. Even though they're here, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're here in the United States. So I forget the statistic. Maybe you recall the statistic, but there's some statistic out there about how few Muslims in the United States actually know a Christian, actually have some kind of relationship with a Christian, and it's just extremely low, right? I don't know if you recall it exactly, but so you work with Immigrant Mission with the EFCA. What does your current role with them entail?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm going to show my brochure.
There you go.
Little commercial. You can get this on our website, the Immigrant Mission. But what we're a ministry to first generation internationals and their families. And so what we're hoping to do is to help local churches create a vibrant welcome for immigrants, especially unreached people groups living in the United States. Now, we've already mentioned that there are unreached people groups in the United States, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Joshua Project.
Yes.
The Joshua Project says that there are 98 unreached people groups within the borders of the United States. And so that is a population of about 15 million people.
Wow.
Living in our country.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is if there's a missionary returning from an overseas assignment, to create a partnership with them in a local church. And we don't necessarily operate in the way of, hey, here's a local church, here's a missionary, let's try to make the connection. We try to work along relational lines. So this would be a missionary returning to a sending church or a home church, and there's an immigrant population in that vicinity. And they would talk to the leadership of the church and say, hey, there's this immigrant population here that I either worked with overseas or I'd like to reach out to. And would you be interested in starting this kind of a ministry here at this church? And then they would form a team and begin trying to engage that group that is near them. And the beauty of it, and we've seen this actually work already. The beauty of that is they already have the cross-cultural ministry experience. So it's not something that's intimidating or overwhelming to them. They have a love for the people. Sometimes, they even know the language. And in a lot of cases, they know the language. So it's just a natural bridge. They can build a bridge from that local congregation to that immigrant people group living in that vicinity of the church.
Mm-hmm. And so a key part of your strategy then is trying to connect those who already have cross-cultural ministry experience, who've been missionaries somewhere else in the world, with continuing that ministry. I recall the statement, you can take the missionary off the field, but you can't take the mission out of the missionary. And so this gives them an opportunity to really continue the kind of ministry that they're passionate about, even if they have to come home for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
And in a lot of cases, they, you've lived overseas. I mean, it takes a lot to get there. Then you get all the training, you learn the language, and then for whatever reason, whether it's family, whether it's retirement, whatever, you're coming back and you have all these
here in the
skills.
past couple of years, it's been COVID, right? There's still, I
Yeah,
mean, I still know missionaries who can't get back to the country of their ministry still, because borders are closed, or COVID, or other related issues that have come about because of that.
yeah, yeah. And so, um, so you have all these skills you've acquired, and the aptitude for the culture and everything. And now I'm just supposed to come home and not use it, or I'm not, this is my heart. And so this is a
Find
way
a
for
job, a
them.
price chopper.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so this is a way for them to employ those things that God has been building into them while they're overseas. They can continue it here. We live in a globalized world. Yeah, that's the fact. I mean, we have
Yeah.
people moving back and forth between countries all the time. A lot of the ways I like to describe my own ministry. I don't know how familiar you are with Chronicles of Narnia and
Oh,
the
yes, yes.
the first book, Magician's Nephew. That's right. This first book. And they have that place that's the wood between the worlds, where you can go into one
Mm-hmm.
pond, you go to one place, go to another pond, go to another. That's kind of how I feel. That there are all these worlds that I can enter into, but I don't live in any one of them. I
Yeah.
kind of live in this wood between the worlds kind of place.
You live in the woods, yeah. So
Yeah.
for those of you who aren't familiar, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is not the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. There is another book, The Magician's Nephew. You should read it.
That's right.
So yes. So why is it important for us? Like our October 6th webinar is going to focus specifically on a biblical basis for this. So why is it important for us to have a specific theology on reaching unreached people groups in North America?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is, the theological foundation. That's our launching pad.
Mm-hmm.
That is what determines our boundaries for how far we can go and places we need to stop, so that we can have biblical fidelity to what it is we're doing. And there are several authors who have written on this: Harold Netland, Matthew Kaming, Vinith Ramachandra, Amit Bhatia. But we're seeing a situation as the church in the West that we haven't encountered on a large scale before. With migrant people groups coming in large numbers, and some of these populations now, they've come earlier. They're now into a second, even third generation. And so how do we need to answer these questions theologically? How do we view people from another world religion? How do we view their religion? What is that? What is that like? I mean, the question: can Christians serve halal meat to Muslim guests when they come over? And wrestling with these kinds of things. And so,
Yeah.
can we work on things together, like work projects and the like? We've play my cards on that question without giving up too much before the webinar. We've done Feed My Starving Children. We've done food banks and the like with Muslims in Muslim communities. And then what are contextualized ways we can share our faith? And Josh, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but a lot of our gospel presentations we have are suited for a Western audience.
Yes.
They're not always, and that doesn't mean the gospel's changed. The gospel has not changed, but some of the analogies, some of the
But how
stories
you
we use,
present it matters.
yeah, and so the way you present it, you can be, thinking you're really being clear because it makes sense to you, but the way your stories you share, analogies you use, things like this, you're going to be speaking a foreign language. So how do we think about that and theologically, and how far can we go with it, in contextualization and still maintain integrity to the gospel?
Still be true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, a key component, well, obviously you're familiar with this, but a key component of that would be, the difference between a guilt innocence culture and an honor shame culture, and how you go about presenting the information. So in a Western worldview, where we tend towards guilt and innocence and legal terminology, right, wrong legal terminology, and presenting the gospel, and that can often fall flat when you're speaking to someone from an Islamic or just Middle Eastern worldview, not necessarily just Islamic, but Middle Eastern perspective, where their focus is more on relationships, relational connections, more collectivist mentality versus individualist mentality. And I know I'm throwing a lot of words out there, but
Right.
come study intercultural studies at Calvary University. You'll figure all those out, right? So anyway.
Okay, let me share a quick, just to illustrate what you're saying. I think I was leading a Bible study of people mostly who were former Muslims at this point, but we were studying one of the crucifixion narratives, and it escapes me which one. I think it might have been in Luke, and it really came out how, hearing and we don't usually think about this in the Western context, but hearing the insults being foisted on Jesus, when he's on the cross. Here is Jesus bearing your shame. He's taking all that shame on himself.
Yeah.
And so that's not something we tend to reflect on, but there it is.
Yeah.
Christ taking that shame, and so that you can have honor, just like what you were just discussing.
Yeah. And it's, all of this is accurate. Like we can understand the gospel in legal terms, and that is accurate. We can understand it in relational terms, but how you communicate it to somebody according to how they think
Yeah.
about life and reality, that's one of the things we do at Calvary Conversations here, is talk about a biblical worldview. Other people's worldviews are different, and how we communicate in a way that meets them where they're at can be very important, right?
Yeah. And it's a
Um,
testimony to the beauty of the gospel that it speaks to all of these worldviews.
yes, yes, yeah. It's not limited. It's not limited to just one of them, but it can meet us right where we're at. So yes. So you did your dissertation research on, was it seven churches in the Chicago area,
Yep.
who were reaching out to Muslims specifically. Why did you choose to do that? How did your dissertation come about? What interested you in doing that level of research?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So at the time I started it, I had been working among the Muslim population of Chicago for 18 years, and
Okay.
so there was a personal interest, but I was also interested in not coming up with maybe a hypothesis, that here's kind of a model that is kind of working. Let's see if people are using it, but more finding out what is happening. What are local churches doing? How are they being effective? What are ways you can get started in it? So I was just interested in asking that question: how are local churches in the Chicago area reaching out to Muslim communities, and really wanting it to, what are some ways we can learn from that, and what are some challenges that we can avoid that I talk about in that study.
Yeah. So, not wanting to give everything away, but like what were a couple of the key conclusions that kind of came out of that?
Yeah, so there were, so I interviewed, I think it was 21 people, and as you said, 7 churches, nine events that I attended just to observe them. And there were 3 primary ministry models, which I'm not going to talk about now because you're going to have to come to the conference to find out what those are.
Yep, gotta come in January.
That's right. Can't give all the way all the secrets out. But there are also 5 challenges and 7 lessons. So if you take all of those 7 churches, looking at all of those cases, I would say you can distill it down that they experienced 5 hurdles, 5 challenges, and there are 7 things that they did these things really well, and we can really learn, and we can learn from both those challenges and those lessons. So not to enumerate all of them, but like some of the challenges can be things like lack of training, overcoming fear, tension in the relationship between Muslims and Christians, and how that is
Yeah.
really kind of an inevitable part of it, because we have differing views of the world, as we talked about, and differing theologies, and we just have to be honest with that. But some of the successes that they did, these are churches that were keeping the Bible central. They weren't trying to hide who they were. And in a lot of ways, the Muslims found that refreshing.
Yeah.
And being concerned with things that your Muslim friends are concerned about. And this is not a specific example, I don't think, that came out in my study, but I'll just tell you personally. Right now, my wife and I are seeing a lot of really open doors among a group of folks called the Gulen movement. They are from Turkey. And if you're familiar with the coup that happened in Turkey in 2016, this is the group that's been blamed for the coup.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of them had spent time in
They're
prison. If you
not
remember,
necessarily responsible. It's just other people are heaping the blame on them. Yeah.
right, correct. And if you remember Andrew Brunson, the pastor who was imprisoned in Turkey during that same time,
Yes.
he
Yes.
was labeled as part of that movement. I don't know how they came up with that charge, but that's how they threw him in
Oh,
prison.
okay.
Um, Anyway, so we've had friends in that movement who have had to flee Turkey. Some have spent time in jail. But talking about compassionate friendship, sometimes it's just you need to sit with them and hear their story, and just
Right.
mourn with them, because
Right.
they're not in a place to be able to move forward. And if you always want to get to the gospel, but if you launch into a gospel presentation at that point, they're not going to be listening. So
Forget it.
yeah.
Right. So, one of my you are no doubt familiar with Nabil Qureshi,
Oh yeah.
if I'm saying his name right. And so he's written several books. He's passed away now, but one of his, I think it was actually his first book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, is his testimony about how he came to faith, and growing up in a devout Muslim family and everything. And he tells the just an incredibly impactful story in that book about how growing up in the United States as a Muslim, he had a lot of Christian acquaintances. He even really struggled to call them friends, but he knew a lot of Christians, and it seemed to him that all these all these Christian acquaintances cared about was giving him the gospel and having him accept the gospel, and that was actually very off-putting to him, because as soon as these individuals, what he writes is that as soon as these individuals discovered that he wasn't going to pray the prayer, he wasn't going to accept Christ, they ceased any kind of having a relationship with him. Their relationship only extended so far as they could convert him. Like, he saw this and he recognized this, and he wanted nothing to do with that. That was not appealing to him. I don't think that would be appealing to me either. And so, but what really reached him in the end, what really reached him was a friend that he had in college who clearly demonstrated to him that regardless of whether he accepted Christ or not, he was still going to be his friend. He still loved him. He still cared about him. He still wanted to have a relationship with him, whether he came to Christ or not. And that genuineness is actually what led him to the Lord.
Yeah. 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 That's a wonderful story. And his friend David Wood, is still very active on social media. So you can check out his stuff. He has some really great apologetical materials and such. But just to add a little something to that as a
Yeah.
personal story. Um, so this was a few years ago. I think this would have been probably around 2016, 2017. I have a friend who's an imam. He's a good friend of mine, now.
Mm-hmm.
He just called me yesterday, but he asked if he could bring some of his high school youth group to witness a service at our church. And,
Okay.
we got our schedules crossed and everything like that and couldn't get a time that worked. And I just finally said, you know what, Christmas is coming up. Why don't you bring them for Christmas? Because then, a Christmas service, they're going to see some, great traditions, things we celebrate, things that are important to us. He said, that's great. I will bring my 12 high school boys for a Christmas service. And so the day came, and I'm expecting, I talk to our church. Everybody's excited. They're coming. And the day came, and one car pulls into the parking lot, and, some Muslims get out. Another car pulls in. Some more Muslims get out. Another car pulls in. We had 40 Muslims, both boys and girls and leaders, attending a church service at our
That
church
is awesome.
that Sunday.
That is
Afterward,
awesome.
we had a reception for them, and this is where what I wanted to highlight. We had a reception for them. Just any questions you have about what you witnessed today, what you experienced. And one of the boys in the group, he'd grown up here. This is not an immigrant. This is somebody probably second generation, third generation Muslim young man. And he raised his hand. He said, "Are Jesus and Santa Claus the same person?" Which at first sounds really funny. But
you can totally see how he came to that conclusion.
Yeah, but he didn't have, again, he's gone to public school, and he did not have a Christian friend that could answer that question for him.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is why I think what we're talking about here, building the relationship is so important. Getting into their lives is so important. Because that's part of how you show the love of Christ to your Muslim friend or to another immigrant who is new to the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real, genuine relationships. We be real, genuine people. So, well, Mike, we need to draw this to a close, but let me for 1 second, let me maybe switch hats. Let's say that I'm a pastor and I'm listening to this. What would be your advice? Maybe I want to start reaching out to people close to me. What would be your advice? What might be some ways I could get started?
Sure. Well, start thinking
in 2
about
minutes or less.
Sure, I can do. Start thinking about the people in your church who have cross-cultural ministry experience. Maybe they've been on a short-term trip. Maybe they are a returning missionary who is currently on furlough or are retired, or they're staying permanently. And start looking at that as kind of your pool of folks who have that experience and have the interest in doing it. Because as anybody knows, any ministry can sound great on paper. If someone is not willing to take responsibility for the ministry, it's going to go nowhere.
Yes.
And these are people who have already had some training. They already have, especially if they're a seasoned missionary. They know how this works. So look at that as your pool of folks who'd be interested in doing it, and then identify a group in your area and see if you can't make a connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So it's been great to have you with us today. I'm looking forward to the webinar and the conference. And so once again, for our listeners, so October 6th, we have a Zoom webinar that is coming up. It is free, but you do have to register for it. We'll have some links down in the description. And then January 23rd through 27th is the conference on global engagement. And Mike will be with us there, especially Tuesday night, for a seminar on how we can be reaching unreached people groups in North America. We're looking forward to that. If you come, we will also have a guest with us. I can't mention his name or organization, but we will have a guest with us who has done a lot of research on unreached people groups in Kansas City. And so not only will you hear a strategy, you'll also here's the people we can start connecting with right now. So would really encourage you to think about registering and coming. So, but that's all we have time for today. Thank you again, Mike, for joining us, and God bless everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary conversation.